In Australian politics, a strange paradox appears at the extremes. From far-right populists to staunch progressives, every faction claims they are the ones defending the true Australia. This shared identity functions as a mythological rulebook. It allows leaders to perform a specific version of themselves while shaming their political opponents. To figure out which ideology actually aligns with this national myth, we cannot rely on political speeches. We need to strip away the rhetoric and mathematically audit the values they invoke. Whoever controls the interpretation of this mythology ultimately controls the political trajectory of the entire nation. This coordinate system allows us to audit those values objectively. The horizontal x-axis tracks morality. On the far left, at -1, we plot actions that serve only the self or a specific group. On the far right, at +1, we plot actions that provide a universal benefit to everyone. The vertical y-axis measures will. Down at -1, we find suppressive, passive actions, forces that prevent or destroy. Up at +1, we find proactive, creative will, forces that build. Every policy, historical event, and cultural archetype in Australia plots neatly onto this exact grid, revealing its true moral vector. Right-wing populism anchors its appeal in the vision of a historically pure, exclusive nation. Plotting the origin of this exclusivity, we find Terra Nullius. This legal fiction erasing Indigenous presence lands deep in negative morality but highly positive will. Beside it sits the White Australia policy, scoring -0.9 morality and +0.6 will. These scores map a highly specific sector on the grid, the greatest lies. These are policies requiring massive, proactive effort used deliberately to erase or exclude others. This coordinate, where high energy meets deep exclusion, is a recurring pattern in the national record. To see how it functions today, we have to look at how modern enemies are constructed on this same grid. In order to maintain that level of exclusion, populist leaders must constantly generate new enemies for the public to fear. Returning to our chart, these enemies plot in the bottom left quadrant. The bludger, at -0.6 and -0.5, represents a parasite extracting without contributing. Populists also plot the immigrant here, framing outsiders as systemic barriers to the established citizen. By isolating these negative archetypes in the public mind, politicians justify the active assertion of racial and class solidarity over universal equality. So, who is buying this math? It is engineered for a very specific demographic, known as the Quiet Australian. In the bottom right, the Quiet Australian scores +0.3 morality, but -0.4 will. This is conformity, people keeping the country stable but lacking proactive virtue. They inhabit the suburb, sitting deep in this passive quadrant, a private retreat from national duty. Because these demographics prioritize safety and avoid risk, they are highly susceptible to the fear-driven politics mapped on the left side of the grid. If fear is so easily weaponized against a passive majority, why hasn't the far right completely captured the Australian political system? The national mythology has a built-in defense mechanism. It inherently rejects grand ideological abstractions in favor of deep skepticism. The nation operates as a bundle of tensions. For every exclusionary lie injected into the political bloodstream, the system triggers an overwhelmingly positive reaction to neutralize it. We see this correction clearly in the top right quadrant of our graph. The Fairgo and Medicare both score +0.9 for morality and +0.5 for will. They act as the ultimate standard of active, universal decency. The systemic reaction to historical racism sits right beside them, the multicultural citizen, requiring the highly proactive dismantling of exclusion. And at the absolute peak of this quadrant is the correction to Terra Nullius. The Mabo decision and Indigenous custodianship score the highest moral vectors in the nation's history. 65,000 years of continuous presence requires no legal fiction. It simply exists. Look at the fully populated grid. Populists consistently target the negative will and negative morality quadrants, yet they face a system whose strongest data points consistently pull the opposite direction, toward the top right. When the system fails, we treat events like the White Australia policy or children in detention as national scandals. You can only betray a promise if that promise actually holds weight. Despite the actors trying to pull it backward, the math points in one direction. Australia is the nation that keeps trying to become itself.